What if the healthiest broth was made for survival, was meant for healing, and wasn't complicated? Long before modern health trends, protein counts, and lab-designed superfoods, people in the time of Jesus Christ relied on simple, slow-simmered broths to nourish the body and sustain daily life. These weren't crafted in laboratories or built around hype. They were made from what was available. Fish pulled fresh from the sea, lentils cooked over open fire, herbs crushed by hand, and grains softened into something warm, filling, and restorative. And somehow, without modern science, these broths delivered exactly what the body needed. That's what makes them so powerful. They were simple, yet intentionally nourishing in ways we're only beginning to understand again. In this video, we're going back to rediscover 8 biblical broths that were actually consumed in the ancient world, and we're showing you exactly how to make them with full recipes you can still use today. If you're drawn to biblical wisdom, natural healing, and simple foods that truly nourish the body, make sure to subscribe to Biblical Roots, turn on the notification bell, and join us as we uncover the forgotten power of ancient nourishment. Because sometimes, the most powerful healing foods aren't new, they're just forgotten. 1. Fish broth. Galilee fisherman's broth. Not every powerful meal came from wealth. Not every source of nourishment came from abundance. Some of the most sustaining foods came straight from the water. Along the shores of the Sea of Galilee, fishing wasn't just an occupation, it was life. Men would cast their nets at dawn, pulling in tilapia and other small fish, bringing back what would feed their families that day. And not all of it was eaten roasted or grilled. Some of it became broth, simple, slow-simmered, deeply nourishing. Fish, whole or in parts, would be placed into clay pots with water, then set over a low fire. Bones, heads, and skin weren't discarded. They were essential, because as they simmered, they released minerals into the water, calcium, collagen, and nutrients the body could absorb easily. Crushed garlic, wild herbs, a bit of salt, that was enough. What emerged wasn't just food, it was restoration. A warm, savory broth that could be sipped slowly, strengthening the body after long days of labor or offering gentle nourishment to someone recovering from sickness. This wasn't luxury, it was wisdom, because without knowing the science behind it, they understood something important. When you extract everything from the fish, nothing wasted, you create something far more powerful than the sum of its parts. And even today, that same kind of broth still carries that quiet strength, simple, accessible, deeply effective, the kind of nourishment that doesn't need to be reinvented, only remembered. 2. Lentil stew broth. Some meals were more than just food. Some carried weight, history, even consequence. Because, in the biblical world, lentils weren't just common, they were essential, earth-grown, hearty, reliable. They could be stored, carried, and cooked into something deeply satisfying. And when simmered slowly with water, they didn't just become a thick stew, they created a rich, nourishing broth that sustained entire households. Lentils would be poured into a pot with water and left to soften over fire. As they broke down, they thickened the liquid, releasing plant-based protein, iron, and fiber into every spoonful. Then came the flavor. Onions softened in the heat, garlic crushed and stirred in, cumin or coriander added for warmth, a drizzle of oil, and a pinch of salt. And, slowly, something simple became something sustaining. This is the kind of dish reflected in the story of Esau, where a single bowl of lentil stew was valuable enough to trade a birthright for. That's how filling, how satisfying this kind of food was. But, beyond the story, there's something deeper here. This wasn't extravagant. It wasn't rare. It was dependable nourishment, the kind that could feed families day after day, keeping them strong through labor, travel, and uncertainty. A broth that didn't just fill the stomach, but supported the body. And maybe that's the reminder in all of it, that sometimes the most powerful foods aren't the ones that impress, but the ones that sustain. 3. Barley broth. Not every meal was meant to impress. Some were meant to endure. In the biblical world, barley was one of the most common grains, affordable, resilient, and deeply woven into everyday life. It grew in harsh conditions, required little, and gave back consistently. And because of that, it became a foundation, not just for bread, but for broth. Barley would be rinsed, then added to a pot of water and placed over a steady fire. Slowly, as it simmered, the grains softened, swelling, breaking, releasing their starches into the liquid. What began as water became something else entirely. Thicker, warmer, more sustaining. Sometimes, a small amount of oil would be added, a pinch of salt, maybe wild herbs gathered nearby. Nothing complicated, nothing wasted. But the result? A broth that stayed with you. Because barley doesn't just fill the stomach, it releases energy slowly. It strengthens over time, providing a steady source of nourishment that could carry someone through long hours of labor, travel, or fasting. This is the same grain connected to moments like the feeding of the 5,000, where barley loaves were present, simple yet sufficient in the hands of Jesus Christ. And that's the deeper pattern here. Provision doesn't always come in abundance. Sometimes it comes in consistency. A pot of barley broth simmering quietly over fire. A meal that doesn't demand attention, but delivers strength. And even now, thousands of years later, it still does the same. Simple, steady, sustaining. The kind of nourishment that was never meant to be flashy, only faithful. 4. Chicken broth, fowl broth. Not every kind of healing comes from something strong. Some of it comes from something gentle. In the ancient world, domesticated birds, chickens, and other fowl were part of daily life. Not always eaten in abundance, not wasted lightly, but when they were used, every part mattered. And one of the most valued ways to prepare them was broth. A whole bird, or its remaining parts, would be placed into a pot of water and set over a low, steady fire. Slowly, over time, the meat would soften, the bones would release their depth, and the water would transform. Clear, golden, restorative. Garlic might be added, onions, if available, a handful of herbs, and as it simmered, the aroma would rise, filling the space with something comforting, something familiar. This wasn't just food for the strong. It was often prepared for the weak, for someone recovering, for someone weary, for someone in need of gentle strength. Because chicken broth is easy to take in, easy to digest, but quietly powerful. Without knowing the science, people understood this. When the body is worn down, it doesn't need complexity. It needs something it can receive, something warm, something simple, something that restores without effort. And that's what this broth became. Not a feast, not a display, but a quiet form of care. A reminder that nourishment doesn't always come in large portions or bold flavors. Sometimes it comes in a humble bowl, held in steady hands, offering strength, one sip at a time. 5. Goat broth. Not all nourishment came from fields or water. Some of it came from the land, from the animals that walked alongside daily life. In the biblical world, goats were everywhere. Not rare, not reserved for special occasions. They were part of survival. Milk, meat, hide, nothing wasted. And when it came time to prepare something deeply sustaining, goat became broth. Cuts of meat, sometimes with bone, would be placed into a pot of water and set over a steady fire. Slowly, as the heat worked its way through, the richness of the meat began to release. Deeper than poultry, stronger than grain, a broth with weight. Garlic would often be crushed and added in. Onions, if available. Wild herbs gathered from the allard, bringing both flavor and subtle healing properties. And as it simmered, the liquid darkened, thickened slightly, becoming something that didn't just nourish but satisfied. This wasn't a light meal, it was fuel. The kind of broth that could sustain shepherds through long days in the wilderness. The kind that could restore strength after labor, travel, or hunger. Because goat, by nature, is hardy, and what it gives carries that same strength. And maybe that's why it mattered. In a world without excess, without convenience, people leaned into what was available and drew everything they could from it, not just for taste, but for life. A pot over fire, a slow transformation, and in the end, a broth that reminded them strength doesn't always come easily, but when it does, it sustains deeply. 6. Herb-infused healing broth. Not every broth needed meat. Not every form of healing came from something heavy. Sometimes, it came from leaves. From what grew quietly in the Allard, often overlooked. Easily gathered, yet deeply powerful. In the biblical world, herbs weren't just flavor, they were function. Hyssop, mint, coriander, bitter herbs, each one carrying something unique, cleansing, soothing, restoring, and when combined into a broth, they became something more. Water would be brought to a gentle boil, fresh or dried herbs added in, sometimes garlic, sometimes a touch of oil, and occasionally a pinch of salt, then left to steep, not rushed, not forced. Because this kind of broth wasn't about intensity, it was about balance, light, aromatic, easy on the body. The kind of broth someone might turn to when digestion felt off, when the body needed cleansing, or when strength had to be rebuilt slowly. Even in Scripture, herbs carried symbolic and practical meaning used in cleansing rituals and daily life alike. Hyssop, in particular, appears in moments tied to purification, connecting physical and spiritual restoration. And that's what this broth reflects, not just nourishment, but renewal. A reminder that healing doesn't always come in strong, heavy forms. Sometimes it comes gently, working quietly beneath the surface. A handful of leaves, a pot of water, and something within it that restores more than expected. 7. Vegetable and pulse broth. Not every table had meat. Not every meal depended on animals. For many in the biblical world, what sustained them daily came straight from the Allard, from what they could grow, gather, and store. Vegetables, legumes, simple crops that didn't demand much, but gave back consistently. And when combined, they became broth. Lentils, beans, gourds, onions, roots, pulled from the soil, all placed into a pot of water and set over fire. Slowly, as the heat worked through them, something began to happen. The vegetables softened, the pulses broke down, and the water absorbed everything. Flavor, nutrients, life from the land itself. This wasn't rushed, because the longer it simmered, the more it gave. Garlic might be added, wild herbs stirred in, a drizzle of oil to bring it together. And what started as a mix of simple ingredients became something deeply nourishing. Not heavy, not extravagant, but complete. The kind of broth that could feed a household. The kind that stretched what little there was into enough. Because, in a world where resources were limited, wisdom wasn't about having more. It was about using what you had fully. And that's what this broth represents. Balance, simplicity, sustained nourishment over time. A reminder that even without abundance, the body can still be strengthened. Sometimes, all it takes is a pot, a fire, and what's already been provided. 8. Bone broth, ancient style. It's often called a modern trend, a health movement, something rediscovered. But the truth is, there's nothing new about it. Because long before it had a name, bone broth already existed. In the biblical world, nothing was wasted. Not meat, not fat, not even bone. Because within the bones, there was still something left to give. After the meat was removed, the remaining bones would be placed into a pot of water and set over a low, steady fire. And unlike quicker meals, this was left to simmer longer, hours, sometimes even longer, because time was part of the process. As the heat worked slowly, the bones began to release what was hidden inside, nutrients that couldn't be seen at first, but were drawn out through patience. The water changed, richer, deeper, more complete. Garlic might be added, herbs gathered from the Allard, a pinch of salt. But the real transformation came from the waiting. This wasn't just cooking, it was extraction, taking what seemed empty and revealing that it still held value. And that's what made this broth powerful. not just because of what it contained, but because of what it represented: resourcefulness, patience, understanding that even what appears used can still nourish. And even today, that same principle remains, that sometimes the deepest strength is found beneath the surface, waiting to be drawn out. And when you step back and look at all of this, one truth becomes clear. These weren't modern recipes. They weren't created in labs or built around trends. They were simple broths: fish, lentils, barley, herbs, vegetables, bones slowly simmered, drawn from the lard, used to nourish, restore, and sustain everyday life. Not by accident, but by design. And even now, thousands of years later, they still carry that same quiet power. If you're drawn to biblical wisdom, ancient nourishment, and simple foods that truly support the body, make sure to subscribe to Biblical Roots, turn on the notification bell, and join us for more content like this. And before you go, let me know in the comments, which of these biblical broths would you actually try first? Until next time, stay rooted, stay nourished, and stay blessed.